We are learning Yoma Dav Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, and we are recording here in TRT Bungalow Colony in the country. Here we go. We're on the Mishnah Dav Lamed Aleph Amid Beis. Zakte Mishnah Pashat Ya Pashat. So now let's just remember what we're up to over here. So the Kohen Gadol in our last Mishnah, we learned that he had to be Tevel. He was Chamash Tfilas Vasar Kedushin Tevel Kohen Gadol Makadosh Rabbi Yom. They were all done in the parva except for the first tefillah. So then Pashat. So he took off his clothes. Yorad. He went down into the mikvah Tavel. He would be Tevel. Allah. He got out. V'nistapik. He dried off, which is important because he didn't want there to be any water on his basar, on his skin. Haviu big days of. They brought him his big days of, his golden garments. Velavash, and he got dressed. Bekidish adav, and he washed his hands and feet. Okay, so now he's wearing his big days of, and he starts doing that voida. Haviu asatama. They brought him the carbon tamid. Kartu, he did a bit of a shchita. Kartu, umeirak achar shchita al yadei, and then somebody else finished off the shchita. Kibul asadam, he received the dam. Remember, he had to do the avodas. Vizarku, and so kartu means he cut reva of the two simanim of the shchita. He started the shchita, and someone else finished it because he needed to be makabel the dam of the carbon tamid. Then he went vizarka. He did the zrikas adam. Nichnes lahaktir keter shel shachar. He did the keteris, the regular keteris. To prepare the candles, and to be makriv the limbs, and the chavitin of the menaches, and the yayin, the nitzach yayin. The keteris in the morning was brought between the zrikas adam and the ivarim. Shalbein arbaim in the afternoon, it was done between the ivarim and the nisachim. Okay. If the Kohen Gadol was old or he was an istinus, so the cold water was going to bother him, they'd heat up the water, and they heat up water on Erev Shabbos, and they'd put that cold water into the mikvah, and to take away some of the cold water. We learned yesterday that there was, I think, it was a spring water that was going into this mikvah constantly. So if he wanted to, the water must have been cold. So they'd heat up some water, put it in, and he'd be table in it. So it wouldn't be so cold for him to go in. Sounds like it was only if he was a zakin or an istinus. Otherwise, they wouldn't do this for him. And why not? A kohen that was young and healthy, they wouldn't heat up the water. We don't want it to look like he's being tayvel l'shem tainag umevatel din ine shalem kippurim. Interesting. Gotta be ma'ayin that there's a din inui on that. That if washing in warm water would be mevatel din inui of Yom Kippur. That's a chasam sefer. Brought down here in the Dirshu. But again, it's only a nira because if you were older and this, that would be mutter to do. Okay. Now it does say, why didn't it mention this in the last Mishnah or in the beginning here when he was tevel for the first tefillah? So this is an interesting diak. The interesting diak that I guess this is the Pri Chadash making, that this din is only being taught here after the Tefillah Rishena, because the chimum of the water was only mutter because she'ein shvus b'mikdash, and that's that specifically in the four tefillahs of the second ones which were in a makam kadosh, but the first tefillah which was in a makam choil, so that would not be okay. Okay, so I got to take back what I said originally. That this water was running. It could be it wasn't. It could be it was in a different. It was in the other mikvah. Others hold that even for the first tefillah they would be allowed to heat up the water, because all of harbayis you say the rule of Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. Interesting machlekes, whether their din of Ein Shvus B'Mikdash only applied b'kodesh, or even applied on the entire Harabayas. Shmach. So like the Gemara. Now our Mishnah has the following. It has Pashat Yarad V'Tavel. He was not Mekadesh Yadav V'Raglav. He did not do a Kiddush Yadayim before he undressed. Only after he went to the mikvah, he got dressed in the big day Zav, then he did a Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Says the Gemara, Amru Rabban Kamei de Rapapa, the Tamidim of Rapapa said to Rapapa, Ha de like Reb Meir. This is not like Reb Meir. The Reb Meir in the next Mishnah is of the opinion, Kivan the Amar Trei Kiddusha Alavisha of it. Lehu. Reb Meir was of the opinion that the Trei Kiddushi, when you'd wash your hand twice, that was Alavisha. That was for with the garments you were going to put on. Take a look at this Mishnah on Daf Lamed. Dalet Amid Beis. The Mishnah says, "Haviu lebeis haparva, ubekodesh haisa, parsu sadan shalbutz, ben el ben am, kidesh yadav v'raglav, ufashat." He'd wash his hands, then he'd get undressed. But Meir says no. First he'd get undressed, and then he'd wash his hands. Why? So the Rabbanan of the Talmid and Rapapa understood, because the Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim were really for the Lavisha, were for what you're going to be putting on, which was the big day bud in this case. But so therefore you don't wash your hands before you take off your clothes. You're gonna do Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim after you take off these clothes, before you put on the next ones. There was like a Kiddush before you put on, and then after you put them on. So says the Talmidim of Rav Papa, Had like Rav Meir. Our Mishnah is not like Rav Meir, because according to Rav Meir, it should say Pashat Yara of the Tavel. I'm sorry, Pashat. Then it should be Kiddush Yadav V'Raglav, and then be Tavel, and then get dressed and be Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglaim again. So when it says Had like Rav Meir, the Rav Meir, given the Amar Trei Kedusha Lavisha of it, since the two Kedusha were done for what you were putting on, so then Hachanaim Laviche Kedusha Alavisha. So here too, he should wash his hands twice for the Lavisha, for what he's going to be putting on. Amar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa disagreed. He says Bein Rabban and Bein Reb Meir, Chad Apshita, the big day Kodesh, v'Chad Alavisha. You're misunderstanding Reb Meir, says Rav Papa. Rav Papa agrees that when the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglaim you're doing originally is really because you just took off your big day Kodesh. Chad Apshita, the big day Kodesh, v'Chad Alavisha, and the other one, the second Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglaim you're doing is for wearing your new big day Kodesh. The machlekes just is, when do you wash your hands for the clothing you're taking off? Do you do that before you take them off, or you do it after you take them off? That's the machlekes. They both agree that you're washing your hands because of your pashit, because of the pshita, because you're taking off big day kodesh, and you wash your hands because you wear big day kodesh. The machlekes is, when do you do that? This is the machlekes. There's a Gemara Darshins the pasuk like this. The pasuk says ufashat v'rachatz v'lavish. That's the order it gives you. If you want to look at the pasuk, it's actually two psukim. So if you look at your first source here in the Torah or Hashalim Aleph, it says Uba Aaron al oil mayid. Aaron's going to come to the oil mayid. Ufashat as big day habad. He's going to take off his big day habad ashalavash that he was wearing. B'vayel hakodesh v'nichem sham v'rachatz etz b'sarei. Then he will wash his basar. B'mayim, b'makam kadosh, v'lavash as begadav, and he'll put on his new begadav. So there's ufashat, v'rachatz, v'lavash. And the Gemara darshins this ufashat, v'rachatz, v'lavash as if it said v'rachatz twice. It's v'shefashat, v'rachatz, and then v'rachatz, v'lavash. So that's the drush of the Gemara. Pashat, v'rachatz, v'rachatz, v'lavash. Reb Meir savas, Reb Meir's of the opinion makish pshita l'lavisha. You make a hekesh between Pshita and Lavisha. Okay, that everybody's going to read to the hekesh. The question is how you make it. Ma levisha, just like when you wash your hands. Ma levisha loivesh. First you get dressed, and then you wash your hands. Af pshita, so too pshita. First you're pashed. First you get undressed, and then you wash your hands. Rabbanan said, Rabbanan of the opinion, makish pshita levisha. Like this, ma levisha, just like the levisha, when you by dressing, kishu lavush mekadesh, you wash your hands when you are dressed. Af pshita, so too when you're not, when you're taking off your clothing, kishu lavish, kishu lavush mekadesh, you wash your hands when you're lavish. So the machlok is how you make this drasha. Is it are we being makish that after you do the deed, whatever the deed is, that's when you wash your hands? Or do we say, how is the deed done? Since the deed of how is the kiddush done? The kiddush is done when you're dressed. So to the pshita is done when you are how's the washing done? We see the washing is done while dressed. So then it's got to be done while dressed both times. So that is what Rav Papa explained. He said, I don't agree to your assumption that Rav Papa is requiring a washing of hands for the Levisha, two washing of hands for Levisha. No, he understands that you wash your hands after a Pshita and after the Levisha. So therefore, he would agree that in our mission here, since you're being Paishet, your big dechol, you didn't need to wash your hands. Meir says that's very fine. Amrulei Rabbanan Rav Papa. The Talmidim of Rav Papa said to Rav Papa, "Umimitz is Amris Hachi. Can you say what you're saying?" But Tanya Lemais, we have a Mufurish Brisa that says not like you, Rav Papa. The Brisa says like this: Parsu sadin shalbutz. They would spread a sadin, a sheet of linen. Beinei lebeina. Pashat, he would undress. V'yar v'tav, go to the mikvah. Olav and Estaba come out and dry off. Heviul big day zav. Then they would bring him big day zav. The lavash, he'd put him on, v'kiddush adav raglav, and he'd wash his hands. That's a Tanakana's opinion. Reb Meir, Pashat, he'd get undressed from his big dechol. V'kiddush adav raglav, and he'd wash his hands. V'yar v'tav, go to the mikvah, olav and Estaba come up and dry off. Heviul big day zav, they'd bring him his big day zav. The lavash, he would put them on, v'kiddush adav raglav, and then wash his hands. So what do you see here? Clearly, Reb Meir's shita is that you do a kiddush adayim v'raglayim twice for what you're going to be wearing. When you do it before you go to the mikvah, you wash your hands. Then after you go to the mikvah, you get dressed and wash your hands again. But the two washings are for the big day kodesh that are going to be worn. And therefore Hitaka argues on our Mishnah. So Amar Lahu, so Papa says back to his Talmid of Itanya, if it's a Brisa, Tanya, it's a Brisa. What do you want from me? If the Brisa says it, the Brisa says it. But he's saying, but without the Brisa, I think that I'm right. But I mean, it's not muchach from Rav Meir, from what he says in the next Mishnah, to have to say that he argues on our Mishnah. You could have learned differently. But if you have a Brisa, so what am I going to do? That's what the Brisa says. That's the way it is. Says the Gemara, Bishlam Reb Meir. I understand according to Meir, I understand how you have 10 times washing your hand, because the first one here in this Mishnah, you also washed your hands. So for every tefillah, there were 2 kiddush adayim raglayim, one before the tefillah and one after he was dressed. That's our kiddushin. El Rabbanon tishahavu. But according to the Rabbanon, it's only 9, because in the first tefillah, he didn't wash his hands after before he took off his clothes, because he was taking off big day chayil, so he didn't wash his hands for that. So Rabbanan Tisha Havu, it's only 9. Says Ami Lucha Rabbanan. The Rabbanan would tell you, El Lucha Rabbanan Kiddusha Basra. The last time when he kipasha big day kodesh, when he took off his big day kodesh, the lavash big day choil, and he was going to put on his big day choil. So the Gemara says, Avadei Hasam. Even though now he's wearing big day choil, he would still wash his hands. Rashi says, Kiddusha Basra. Kishagamar Avedis Kalayim, when he finishes Aved the whole day, Upaisha Big Day Kodesh, and he takes off his Big Day Kodesh, Relavish Big Day Chayil, Avedlei Hasam. Kishabalish Big Day Kodesh, when he take off his Big Day Kodesh, till be done Sviralon Kiddush Chad Apshita, the Chad Alavishay. According to other Rabbanan, you would do one for taking off the clothes and one for putting on the new clothes. Rabbi Meir, Loi Mekadesh Midi. He wouldn't do anything. According to Rabbi Meir, there'd be no point in washing your hands here at all because you're putting on Big Day Chayil. So you wouldn't wash your hands at all. But according to the Chachamim, before you took off your Big Day Kodesh, he would wash his hands. So that's where you get the 10th one, according to the Rabbanan. Okay, we'll stop here for Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. We'll see you by the next year.